Alrighty, so in today's video we are going to be running you guys through a PC part picker list, and that'll take place on PC part picker right here. And if we just go to the builder tab, we'll click start new. Kind of an overwhelming website when you first start out. I remember back in October when I knew nothing about building a PC. I was quite overwhelmed. I didn't know where to start, but they make it really easy for you. And it starts at the top here with the CPU, as that's the biggest piece of your PC that's going to help narrow everything else down for you. This website is fantastic because what it does is it filters out the options that are no longer compatible with the parts that you've chosen, which really starts to minimize your chance of error in terms of picking parts that are incompatible. So we start with the CPU. They have two different brands, which is the AMD Ryzen series and then the Intel Core LGA 1700 is the socket name. And these two brands have very similar performing parts. Intel's typically used for all-around production type builds. If you're just doing gaming builds, AMD Ryzen seems to be the best cost per performance, in which the 7800X 3D, as you see here, is the ideal one to go with if you're looking for that ultimate top tier performance. However, if we're looking to build a somewhat budget to mid-range build and want to stay on a current platform, which you guys can see here is the, oh, it doesn't show. Anyways, the 7000 series is considered the AM5 platform. That is their current, most up-to-date CPU that they have right now. We're going to go ahead and click on the 7600. Actually, we're going to click on the 7600X, which is just a little bit cheaper, very, very similar performance when it comes to gaming. So let's assume we're doing just a gaming build. Going ahead and click that. Now the motherboard. This website has filtered out all of the motherboards that would be compatible with the Intel socket. So these will all be, as you can see here, AM5 sockets, which is really nice because it does the hard work for us. And now we just got to filter through and find which motherboard's going to work for us. In this case, again, if we're doing a budget to mid-range sort of build, we can filter by price. This is already filtered by most popular, what gets selected the most. There's a couple things you want to keep in mind with a motherboard is how many SSD slots are there? Do they come with heat sinks? How are the VRMs? So how does the heat get managed properly? In this case, we're just going to take a look over. Around $150 US is going to be pretty decent for the budget build that we're kind of making here. So around 150, let's just go with the MSI B650 gaming plus Wi-Fi. We're going to click that. And cooler, the 7600 non-X version does come with a stock cooler, which does an adequate job. If we wanted, we can really choose something like a Thermalright Peerless Assassin, which is a fantastic cooler that should keep in all games you play anywhere around 50 to 75 degrees tops. However, again, if we're sticking with that budget idea, we can click something like the Thermalright Assassin 120 Refined SE. This is just a nice little one fan cooler, so let's go ahead and click that. 17 bucks, not too crazy. In terms of memory, that AM5 AMD socket set tends to work really well with 6,000 mega transfers a second and CL30, which is the latency. And we're gonna put that around 32. 30 is ideal. And then we're gonna select the price from cheapest to most expensive. And I forgot to add the gigabytes. So typically these days, 32 gigabytes and 16 gigabytes are very, very similar in price, so you might as well go with the 2x16, which is 32 gigabytes, and that's what's most common on the AM5 platform. So as you can see here, it'll automatically sort it by price lowest to highest, which brand doesn't really matter. If you care about the looks, go ahead, but since we're doing a more performance-based budget to mid-range build, we can go ahead and choose the white one. Typically, white pieces are more expensive, so if we wanted to spend a little bit more and go with the black version, it's $1 more. We're gonna go with the Silicon Powered Value Gaming, as this is DDR5 6,000 megatransfers per second, and CL30, which is the latency. You want the lower latency and the higher speed at that 6,000. So this is kind of the sweet spot in terms of performance, latency, and price. So $91, easy to choose. And now for storage, if we're gonna, again, stick to that budget side, we'll stick with the 1 terabyte. which we can scroll down here on this side and sort by capacity, in which we'll take those out. And also we want the M.2 2280. Now that's just the size, I believe in millimeters, if I'm not mistaken, that the SSD comes in. It's maybe about this big. It's not big at all. So now when we're sorted here, we can move the maximum capacity to only be 1 terabyte drives. Kingston NV2 is the most popular, very, very reputable company and drive in itself. Samsung ones are a lot faster, but they do get expensive. As you can see here, the 980 Pro is $89 when we could get the same thing for $54. Now for gaming, it doesn't really matter. If you are going to be doing some sort of production type build, for music or video editing or whatnot, you may want a faster drive, but for the sake of this build, we're just going to choose the Kingston NV2. There we go. And now the video card, which is the most exciting part of the build. This is the graphics card. It's what's able to make your games run at 4K, 1440p and whatnot. Again, there's 2 brands. There's the AMD, which is similar to the CPU, and then there's a really big company, which you might have heard about in recent news, is NVIDIA. Both are graphics card companies, although NVIDIA does a lot more AI stuff. If we're looking at pure performance, so this is price to raw FPS, no AI, no DLSS, no enhancements of any kind, AMD is going to be the winner pick by a mile. So for a budget build like this, the current series is the 7000 series, similar to the CPU. For a nice budget build, we can go with, we can do, let's just say 7800 XT. The XT just means it's a faster, more powerful version than the non-XT. In this case, there is only the 7800 XT, and we can organize by price, lowest to highest, with the ASRock Challenger right now being the cheapest option. And you can see here for just a little bit more, you can get the Gigabyte version. Different brands have different cooling capabilities, which doesn't really make a difference at the end of the day, maybe a couple degrees. A lot of different brands make different looking cards. Again, the ASRock Challenger, as you can see here, isn't the greatest looking card, but for the sake of this build, it is a 7800 XT. It's going to be the same performance. Don't have to worry about that. So we're going to go ahead and add that. Now for a case, ideally we want to find something that lines up with the size of our motherboard. So we can go back here and see that this is an ATX motherboard. That's a full-size motherboard. Now there's micro ATX and mini ITX, which get even smaller. And for the sake of this, we're going to stick with the ATX builds. ATX mid tower is about where we want to be. Again, it'll sort by most popular. Now you want to look for a case that has a full 2 to 3 front fans, depending on the size, and an exhaust fan out the back as well. So something like this, the Montech Air 903, it has your 3 fans in the front, 1 fan in the back, for, how much did this cost us here? $69. You typically want to stay between $69 to $120-ish is the ideal range for quality and performance builds. 120 is getting a little more expensive. Obviously, more expensive cases tend to look better, but if we're sticking with this build that we have in mind, I'd also go with the NZXT H5 Flow, although I don't believe that has a rear exhaust fan, so we're going to go with the Montech Air 903. And finally, one of the most important parts, and one you definitely do not want to cheap out in, is going to be your power supply. And like everything else, it rates it by most popular. Typically, these are going to be the best power supplies that you can get. Reason being is they are highly rated on the PSU cultist list. Now what that is just a website that a bunch of people came up with that heavily tests these different power supplies and shows you what's going to be most efficient, most reliable, best warranty, stuff like this. And they rate them by, I believe it's, I don't know if they start with S tier, but A, B, and C. For a budget build, we want to be in that C to B tier. However, again, for the sake of this build, we're going to choose probably a B or A tier power supply. So we want to take a look at the estimated wattage out here, which is 447 watts. We want to take that rule of thumb as you take that and multiply by 1.5. So that's, what are we, almost at 500, call that 250. So add 250 to this, that's going to be around 600, 700 watts. So we're going to find a 750. I just type 750 into the search bar here. It'll automatically sort. And the MSI Mag AGL series is pretty good at $99. The Corsair is pretty good. Corsair has really thick cables. I have that in my own PC. Gigabyte's decent as well You know what, for the sake of this, we're just gonna go with the Gigabyte, as it is the most, it is the cheapest one here. And again, cheap, it should be rated at a C or B tier on the PSU cultist list. Again, go back and check it, do your due diligence. And now we have a pretty wicked build here that can run 1440p no problem at $1,133. So all in all, pretty solid build for $1,000. You may need to buy your Windows operating system either with the full license, or you can get a cheap key from an online site, or you don't have to even activate it at all. So with that being said, that wraps up my first mock video. Thanks all for watching.